Now, before you furiously leave the video because you feel like you've just been duped by a clickbaity thumbnail, hear me out, because actually there's a lot of truth to what's on that there thumbnail. Ultralight camping and backpacking has really exploded over the last 5 or 10 years, and with good reason, because it's an absolute game changer. It makes it more enjoyable to go out and hike and to camp. It makes it so that you can do longer days. It means that you can do more technical things like climb with your backpack and things like that. But to be honest, like with most things, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, and there is a cost associated to that, and perhaps one that people don't really think about too much. Most of us know that in order to build muscle, not only do we need to do the exercise, but then we also need to eat more. And the same is true for maintaining that muscle. Every pound of muscle that we've got is going to require another, say, 10 calories every single day just to maintain. And what this essentially means is that you need to eat more every single day just to stay alive. So with that in mind, from an evolutionary point of view, it just doesn't make any sense for our bodies to allow us to keep hold of muscle that it doesn't need. I'll give you a couple of examples of how this all works. So if you're 18 stone, your legs are going to be much more muscular than if you were 12 stone, because your body needs more muscle to be able to carry around that extra weight. If you were to start going to the gym every day and bench pressing 100 kilograms, you know that you'd put muscle on. You also know intuitively that if you stop going to the gym every day, you're going to lose that muscle. And this really is the crux of it all. Essentially, if you don't use it, you really are going to lose it. So when I very first started wild camping years ago, I'd say that, like most people, my backpack weighed anywhere between 10 and 15 kilograms. So this is a 22 litre backpack and it weighs just over 2.8 kilograms, which is ridiculous. But that's actually got a 2-man tent in there, an extra wide sleep mat and an electric pump, as well as a full cooking kit and all of the things that you'd need for an overnighter. And that right there is the point. My body is obviously not going to require as much muscle to carry around a 2.8 kilogram backpack as it would to carry around a 12 kilogram backpack, for example. It's a quarter of the weight. So if you've been following my channel at all, you'll probably know that I used to weigh 17, 18 stone, and I lost a lot of weight really quickly as soon as I got into hiking and camping. Now, I lost around about 4 stone in 9 months. It was quite rapid. And one of the things that I noticed was I just felt really, really strong. And the reason for that is because as I was losing weight, I was also hiking around wearing a really heavy backpack. So my legs had no reason to lose the muscle, which meant that if I ever went out for a walk without the backpack, I just felt ridiculous. I felt like I could leap over a truck. Now that was about 12 years ago. And since then, I've lost a lot of muscle mass in my legs because A, my body's just used to walking around with much less weight than it used to be. And B, because I've gone ultralight. So essentially, instead of walking around with a 10 to 15 kilogram backpack, I'm now walking around with usually no more than 4 or 5 kilograms. And basically, my body has absolutely no reason whatsoever to keep hold of the muscle that it used to have when I was 17 stone, or when I was walking around with a 10, 15 kilogram backpack. Now, I'm quite an obsessive person, so whenever I try something, I don't tend to do things by halves. So the transition from walking around with a big heavy backpack to going ultralight was actually really quite rapid. So because the transition from normal backpacking to ultralight backpacking happened really rapidly, in a similar way to the way that I lost all of my weight quite rapidly, my body didn't have a chance to catch up. Basically, my body weight's leveled out. I fluctuate by around about a stone. But what's happened is I've not done any hiking with a heavy backpack for a good 3 or 4 years. And this has 100% taken its toll. And I notice this every single year when it comes to winter. The transition from free season to winter mountaineering is quite a jarring one for your body, really. All of a sudden, you've got to wear really heavy boots. You've got to put ice axes in your backpack. You know, you've got fleeces. You've got all this extra stuff. So your backpack can more or less double in weight. And what this basically means is your first month or so of the winter can actually be a little bit torturous because your body just needs to adapt. It needs to build a little bit more muscle to cope with the extra weight that you're suddenly carrying. Now, if you've not seen it, I actually have got a video about my ultralight winter kit, and that's another project that I did where I essentially halved the weight of that. And again, there was a massive, massive improvement when I first started using that. And now that's basically the norm. So my body's obviously adapted again for that. So ultimately, the way that this works is your body's only going to allow you to keep hold of the right amount of muscle for it to survive. And your body doesn't fully understand the difference between being 17 stone or being 13 stone and carrying a really heavy backpack. All it really knows is that most of the time it feels like it needs extra muscle in its legs. And as a result of my ultralight journey, my body has essentially settled down to the fact that I do weigh 13 stone, and I'm very rarely going to be carrying much more than 4 or 5 kilograms in my backpack. So it just doesn't need the same muscle that it used to. There's been a few times recently when I've gone out with a particularly heavy camp kit. Maybe I've took loads of fresh food, or like the other day I actually went out with a kayak, and I bloody well noticed. And if I could go back in time to when I was always walking around with a heavy backpack, I wouldn't have found any of those hikes a problem whatsoever. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, because it's actually quite easy to get around this problem. Essentially, all you need to do is every other hike or every third hike, whatever, just go out with a fairly heavy backpack. And all you're doing there is you're just making sure that your body doesn't decide that it no longer needs that muscle. Alternatively, you could go to the gym and do leg presses and things like that to build up your muscle. There's various options, but essentially the easiest way is to just don't go ultralight all of the time. Now, in the past, I've resorted to just putting actual weights in my backpack rather than bulking it up by putting something ridiculous like 10 stoves in there. Well, there you go, a short and sweet video. Let me know in the comments below if you've ever experienced similar, or even if you completely disagree and you think I'm talking shite.